Most empires are built on stone, on marble columns and fortified walls. But the greatest financial empire of our age was built on something far lighter, a dream, a promise, and a digital illusion. Imagine a boy in a t-shirt and uncombed hair, sitting quietly in a glass office in the Bahamas. He was called a genius, a reformer, the responsible adult in a reckless new financial world. At just 30 years old, Sam Bankman-Fried, known simply as SBF, built FTX from nothing to more than $30 billion in value. Venture capital firms followed, celebrities endorsed, regulators praised. He testified before Congress, spoke beside central bankers, and was trusted with the savings of millions. But as the sun set over the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, the numbers began to drift. The math no longer balanced. The vaults were empty. The safeguards were ceremonial. In the span of 72 hours, one of the most celebrated exchanges in the world collapsed. What remained was not an elaborate deception, but a simple truth. Customer money had been taken, moved quietly into risky bets and private trades through a shadow firm called Alameda Research. This was not merely a fraud, it was a revelation, a moment when the rituals of modern finance, due diligence, regulation, journalism were exposed as hollow performances. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the most audacious collapse of the digital age. Not just the fall of Sam Bankman-Fried, but the system that allowed a $30 billion illusion to exist in plain sight. So now, close your eyes. Let the screen grow dim. There is nothing left to trade and nothing left to lose. We are entering the vault of the $30 billion fraud. As we begin this journey, I invite you to leave a small mark of your presence. Whether it is a simple good night or a thought on the history we explore tonight, your words help our library grow. Please leave a comment below and let me know which era of history or which financial mystery you would like to sleep to next. I read every word in the quiet hours of the night. The significance of the FTX collapse extends far beyond cryptocurrency. It exposed something deeper, a quiet weakness at the heart of modern finance itself. We are told that layers of protection stand between ordinary people and financial catastrophe. Regulators, auditors, venture capital firms, journalists, all watching, all verifying, all guarding the gates. But at FTX, these safeguards did not fail dramatically. They faded. The Securities and Exchange Commission had spent years scrutinizing crypto, yet the fraud passed quietly beneath its gaze. Prestigious venture capital firms invested hundreds of millions without confirming whether customer money was ever truly separated at all. Elite accounting firms, elite law firms worked alongside FTX, while basic financial controls simply did not exist. Financial media published glowing profiles celebrating innovation without ever asking the most elementary question: where did the money come from? This failure did not occur in the shadows. It happened in full view. At the crossroads of venture capital, regulatory engagement, and financial innovation, with one of the most visible figures in the entire industry. And so the question lingers. If oversight collapsed this completely, for a company this large, this public, this celebrated, what does that say about the countless institutions operating quietly beyond the spotlight? The lesson of FTX is not merely fraud, it is illusion. An elaborate architecture of regulation that looks solid, sounds reassuring, and feels official, yet often exists only to create the appearance of safety. This appearance is dangerous because it invites complacency. It encourages risk. Each participant assumes someone else has already checked, but no one has. FTX did not happen before the lessons of history. It happened after 2008, after Theranos, after WeWork, after countless crypto collapses. And still, the pattern repeated, which tells us something unsettling. These failures are not accidents. They are features. The fraud succeeded not through brilliance, but through neglect. By slipping into the wide gap between how finance claims to operate and how it truly does. A gap so vast that billions can vanish before anyone with authority chooses to look closely enough to notice. To understand how Sam Bankman-Fried built and ultimately destroyed FTX, we must first step back. We must understand the world from which cryptocurrency emerged. Crypto was born in the long shadow of the 2008 financial crisis, when banks were rescued and ordinary people were not. Bitcoin's first block, its genesis, carried a quiet protest, a reference to bailouts, a signal of distrust. The promise was simple: a financial system without central banks, without governments, without intermediaries. Trust would be replaced by code. This idea drew many followers: libertarians suspicious of authority, technologists enchanted by innovation, speculators chasing extraordinary returns, and quietly, those who recognized opportunity in chaos. An unregulated system, irreversible transactions, names replaced by numbers, ideal conditions for deception. By the time Bankman-Fried arrived in 2017, this cycle was already familiar. Boom, collapse, reinvention. Mt. Gox, once the largest Bitcoin exchange, had vanished years earlier. 850,000 Bitcoins lost, stolen, or mismanaged. No one ever fully knew. Initial coin offerings followed, billions raised, promises made, and then silence. Yet still, the industry grew. because the reward was always larger than the risk for enough people. Into this world stepped Sam Bankman-Fried. His story sounded different. MIT, physics, Jane Street. He spoke calmly, precisely, about probability and ethics, effective altruism, doing the most good with the most money. He claimed he was not seeking wealth for himself, only to give it away. This mattered, because it suggested that this time would be different. In 2017, he founded Alameda Research, a trading firm, quiet, mathematical. Its early success came from arbitrage,
Buying where prices were low, selling where they were high. Bitcoin in America, Bitcoin in South Korea, the so-called kimchi premium. It was legitimate. It worked. But markets learned. The gaps narrowed. Competition arrived. Returns fell. At that moment, a choice appeared. Accept less or reach further. Alameda chose risk. Leverage increased. Speculation replaced discipline. Losses grew quietly. And so, in 2019, FTX was born, an exchange, a marketplace. On the surface, a business that earned fees no matter who won or lost. Beneath that, something more valuable: control. Customer deposits, billions resting in place. FTX and Alameda were separate on paper, but in reality, they shared leadership, systems, and intent. The separation was imagined. From the beginning, the architecture allowed it. Customer funds could flow silently into Alameda. No walls, no alarms, no one watching. And so, it did not begin later. It was there from the start. The transformation of FTX from exchange to fraud did not happen suddenly. It followed a mechanism, a series of decisions embedded into the structure from the beginning. When customers deposited money at FTX, those funds were meant to remain separate, held in trust, available on demand. This is the foundation of every exchange. The exchange does not own customer money, it only holds it. At FTX, this principle was broken deliberately. Software was written that allowed Alameda Research to maintain a negative balance with no meaningful limit. In plain terms, Alameda could take customer money without collateral, without restriction, without obligation to repay. This was not accidental. The code itself made the choice clear. Alameda was exempt. Margin limits, liquidation rules, borrowing caps, all applied to everyone else, but not to Alameda. When ordinary traders lost money, their positions were closed automatically. When Alameda lost money, nothing happened. When others tried to borrow too much, the system refused. When Alameda borrowed, the system stayed silent. These privileges were not hidden. They were written into the core of the exchange.
Yet no investor asked why. No auditor pressed further. No regulator noticed. Alameda's chief executive, Caroline Ellison, would later testify. Between $10 and $20 billion of customer money was used by Alameda to repay lenders, to fund investments. Hundreds of companies, many with no viable future, valuations untethered from reality. These were not careful investments. They functioned as distribution, money flowing outward to build influence, to politicians, to celebrities, to regulators, a network of obligation. At the same time, Bankman-Fried cultivated an image: careful, responsible, ethical. He became a major political donor, tens of millions of dollars flowing into campaigns. He testified before Congress, not as a suspect, but as an advisor, helping to design regulation. This cooperation signaled legitimacy. If regulators were listening, then surely nothing was wrong. In hindsight, this was capture, influence replacing oversight. The language of effective altruism served the same purpose: a moral shield. Criticism became uncomfortable. Questioning him meant questioning charity itself. Only after the collapse did reflection begin. When it finally broke, it broke quickly. In November 2022, a balance sheet leaked. Alameda's assets were mostly FTT, a token created by FTX itself. Illiquid, fragile. Its liabilities were very real. The system fed on itself. FTX depended on Alameda. Alameda depended on FTT. FTT depended on belief. When Binance announced a sale, belief faltered. Withdrawals surged. FTX reached for money that was no longer there. $8 billion. Sought, promised, unavailable. An acquisition was announced, then withdrawn. Within 72 hours, FTX was finished. Bankruptcy, resignation, silence. Later, the records were examined. There were none. Customer funds mixed with corporate money. Loans to executives, including to Bankman-Fried himself. No controls, no separation, no discipline. Billions entrusted to nothing. To understand how FTX's fraud endured for as long as it did, we must examine something larger, not deception alone, but legitimacy, how it is constructed, and how, in this case, it quietly failed. The first mechanism is venture capital due diligence, the process meant to decide what is real and what is not. Sequoia Capital, one of the most prestigious firms in the world, invested more than $200 million in FTX. They also published a profile. It praised Bankman-Fried as a genius, admired his eccentricity, his ability to play video games while negotiating billion-dollar deals.
But it did not mention segregation of customer funds. It did not examine internal controls or the relationship between FTX and Alameda Research. After the collapse, the investment was written down to zero. The profile was deleted. What remained was the realization. The diligence had been theatrical. This failure was not isolated. Across the industry, capital poured in. $32 billion in valuation. More than $2 billion raised. A teacher's pension fund. A sovereign wealth fund. A global technology fund. Each with teams, resources, mandates to verify. Yet none confirmed whether customer money was truly separate. None verified reserves. None ensured governance existed to prevent self-dealing. The pattern was clear. In an era of abundant capital, due diligence became narrative evaluation. Credentials checked, growth admired, fundamentals ignored. The second mechanism was auditing. FTX claimed audited financials. In reality, it relied on a small firm, unequipped for the task. Later, that firm acknowledged it had never conducted a full audit at all. Larger firms had declined, too complex, too risky. So the appearance of oversight remained, without the substance. In bankruptcy, the records were examined. They were worse than absence, so disordered that even seasoned administrators could not trace billions of dollars. The third mechanism was regulation. Multiple agencies, shared responsibility, and no one fully accountable. Securities, derivatives, money transmission, each with jurisdiction, none with clarity. Bankman-Fried courted them openly, spoke their language, offered cooperation, and so they looked elsewhere. The fourth mechanism was journalism. Covers, lists, profiles. A fortune estimated, a reputation reinforced. Even when he explained that parts of crypto resembled a Ponzi scheme, no investigation followed. Access was preserved, skepticism deferred. And so legitimacy accumulated. Not because truth was verified, but because everyone assumed someone else had done so. The collapse of FTX reveals patterns that extend far beyond cryptocurrency. It is tempting to treat it as an exception, a strange failure in a strange industry. But it was not an anomaly. It was a mirror. At its core, FTX operated like a bank. Customer deposits were accepted, then redeployed. They were lent, invested, speculated with. This structure is not unique. Traditional banks do the same. They do not keep every dollar deposited in reserve. They operate on fractions. The difference is not the risk, it is the protection. Traditional banking exists within a regulatory perimeter.
Minimum reserve requirements. Deposit insurance. Central banks as lenders of last resort. When liquidity disappears, the system intervenes. FTX had none of this. It assumed the risks of fractional reserve banking without accepting any of its constraints. An unregulated bank holding customer deposits, using them for speculation. This was not accidental. It was the appeal. Cryptocurrency offered a regulatory arbitrage. Activities forbidden or tightly controlled in traditional finance could be reframed as innovation. The claim was novelty. The reality was avoidance. The venture capital ecosystem that surrounded FTX reveals a deeper pathology. For more than a decade, capital was abundant. Interest rates hovered near zero. Money needed somewhere to go. Venture funds grew larger, faster. They needed to deploy billions every year. Speed became more important than scrutiny. The older model emphasized patience, verification, sustainability. The newer model rewards narrative, growth projections, founder mythology. Operational reality became secondary. FTX reached a valuation of $32 billion, less than 3 years after its founding, in an industry infamous for fraud. This valuation reflected momentum, not substance. The regulatory failure surrounding FTX was not unique. It reflects the limits of modern oversight. In the United States, the Securities and Exchange Commission employs roughly 4,000 enforcement staff. They oversee markets worth tens of trillions, thousands of public companies, thousands of advisors. The scale mismatch is unavoidable. Oversight becomes selective, reactive. Fraud is discovered after collapse, not before. This creates a quiet assumption that questionable behavior will likely go unnoticed unless it grows too large to ignore. FTX was not sophisticated. It was unchecked. The political dimension completes the picture. Sam Bankman-Fried became one of the largest political donors in America. Approximately $40 million in a single election cycle. Officially, to influence pandemic preparedness and cryptocurrency regulation. The conflict is obvious. Politicians who receive such donations rarely champion aggressive oversight. Regulators anticipating private sector careers rarely antagonize future employers. Thus, regulation becomes negotiable, shaped by access, influence, relationships. FTX did not exploit a broken system. It operated exactly as the system now functions. The collapse of FTX exposed something deeper than fraud. It revealed how power and accountability are actually distributed in modern finance, not equally. What emerged was a familiar structure, a two-tier system. When FTX failed, bankruptcy proceedings showed that not all participants were treated the same.
Some investors had special withdrawal privileges. They were allowed to move funds even as ordinary customers were locked out. Some institutional players received private information about FTX's financial condition, information never shared with regular users. This was not an exception. It reflects a broader reality. Markets are described as fair, transparent, regulated, but those assurances apply unevenly. Sophisticated actors operate in a parallel system, with better access, better terms, better information. Ordinary customers are offered protection in theory. In practice, they absorb the losses. The relationship between Sam Bankman-Fried and the effective altruism movement reveals another mechanism of modern legitimacy. Effective altruism claims to apply reason and evidence to doing good. It promises efficiency, optimization, moral clarity. In practice, it attracted wealthy technology and finance elites and offered something valuable: moral insulation. The philosophy implied that wealth accumulation, by almost any means, could be justified if future intentions were charitable. Bankman-Fried's association with effective altruism granted him credibility in elite intellectual circles. It discouraged skepticism. Criticism could be reframed as hostility toward charity, or as failure to grasp sophisticated ethics. Only after the collapse did serious reflection occur, revealing how ethical language had functioned less as restraint and more as cover. Celebrity endorsements formed another pillar of legitimacy. FTX paid enormous sums to athletes and entertainers. Tom Brady, Gisele Bündchen, Stephen Curry, Naomi Osaka. Their presence signaled safety. If admired figures trusted FTX, why shouldn't you? No evidence suggests these endorsers examined FTX's finances. They sold trust without verifying its foundation. After the collapse, lawsuits followed. Customers claimed they had been misled by purchased credibility. Trust had become a commodity, bought, packaged, distributed. The speed of FTX's ascent is perhaps the most revealing detail. In less than 3 years, FTX named a major sports arena, aired Super Bowl advertisements, partnered with global leagues, attracted billions from elite investors, and placed its founder before Congress as a regulatory authority, all within an industry infamous for fraud. Despite obvious conflicts of interest, despite radical opacity, despite public statements that openly compared crypto dynamics to Ponzi schemes, the lesson is not subtle. Legitimacy is no longer earned through transparency or restraint. It is performed through the right investors, the right celebrities, the right media coverage, the right political access. When those signals are convincing enough, the question of truth becomes secondary.
The path from FTX's founding to its collapse follows a pattern as old as financial fraud itself. It begins legitimately, then it accelerates. First, real business activity, then pressure. Growth expectations rise, returns narrow, and small compromises appear reasonable, temporary. Alameda Research began with genuine arbitrage trading. Price discrepancies between markets created real profit. But arbitrage never lasts. As competitors arrived, margins collapsed. So Alameda reached for leverage. Leverage magnifies gains and losses. When losses arrived, they were not accepted. Instead, customer funds were used, at first to cover gaps, later to conceal them. Each misappropriation created a larger hole, and each larger hole required greater confidence from the outside world, so the performance intensified. More marketing, more celebrity partnerships, higher valuations, larger funding rounds, not to grow the business, but to sustain belief. This is not unique to FTX. Theranos followed the same arc, a revolutionary promise, inability to deliver, then deception. More publicity, more partnerships, until reality asserted itself. WeWork followed another variation, a real business, expanded beyond sustainability, accounting blurred, valuations detached. The collapse arrived only when public scrutiny began.
The pattern repeats because the incentives align. Early honesty means lower valuations. Failed fundraising, reputational damage, personal failure. Continuing the fraud offers hope. Hope that growth will save it. Hope that luck will intervene. And even if collapse comes, wealth may already have been extracted. Cryptocurrency accelerated this dynamic. Regulatory absence allowed behaviors that traditional finance would halt immediately. Irreversible transactions ensured that stolen funds could never be recovered. The culture celebrated speed, disruption, and disdain for safeguards. Technical complexity provided cover. Old rules were dismissed as obsolete, even when the fraud looked remarkably familiar. Jurisdictional fragmentation completed the shield. Funds crossed borders. Entities multiplied. Each regulator assumed someone else was responsible. The political and media environment completed the loop. From 2019 to 2022, cryptocurrency was treated as destiny. Journalists sought visionaries. Policymakers sought guides. Bankman-Fried offered both. He spoke fluently, confidently, and just deeply enough to discourage scrutiny. Regulation became collaboration. Oversight became dialogue. And fraud accelerated until there was nothing left to accelerate.
What the collapse of FTX ultimately reveals is not that fraud exists in finance. Fraud has always existed. The revelation is something else. It is that the institutions built to prevent it, to detect it, and to punish it have hollowed out. They still exist, they still speak, but they now provide reassurance rather than protection. Every mechanism that should have stopped FTX failed. Venture capital due diligence, auditing, regulatory oversight, financial journalism, market discipline, all failed. Not quietly, not at the margins, but comprehensively. FTX was not hidden, it was prominent, operating in a sector already known for fraud. Yet obvious irregularities went unchallenged. This points to something deeper than incompetence. It points to structural decay. Each institution meant to provide oversight operates under incentives that discourage scrutiny. Venture capital firms are rewarded for speed, for deployment, for valuation growth. Thorough investigation slows deals and risks missing the next opportunity. Auditors are paid by the companies they audit. Finding serious problems means losing the client. Regulatory agencies are outmatched, underfunded, understaffed, and staffed by individuals who often expect to work in the industry they oversee. Journalists depend on access. Critical reporting risks silence, so skepticism becomes costly. Together, these incentives produce a dangerous equilibrium. Each institution assumes someone else is doing the real verification. Each performs a surface-level review, and the collective process creates the illusion of safety. In reality, no one is truly looking. This illusion is not harmless. It encourages risk. Customers deposited billions into FTX precisely because powerful institutions appeared to endorse it. Prestigious investors, congressional testimony, these were interpreted as validation. They were not. They were signals successfully performed. FTX's rise also exposed how modern finance allocates capital, not through fundamentals, but through narrative. A $32 billion valuation was not built on profits or sustainable revenue. It was built on a story. The brilliant founder, the ethical vision, the responsible adult in a reckless industry. The story mattered more than the numbers. And finally, the political dimension. Bankman-Fried donated tens of millions of dollars to political campaigns. This alone distorts regulation. No secret deals are required. Officials dependent on donations rarely champion aggressive enforcement. Regulators appointed by such officials tend toward accommodation. Regulation becomes negotiable. FTX did not hide from oversight, it courted it, and in doing so revealed how hollow oversight had become. Not because rules were broken in secret, but because they no longer mattered. As Sam Bankman-Fried sat in a courtroom in the Bahamas, the meaning of FTX finally became clear. The celebrated founder was gone.
In his place sat a defendant. The fraud itself was not complex. It did not rely on clever mathematics or novel technology. It was one of the oldest crimes in finance, taking customer money and using it without permission. What made FTX extraordinary was not how the crime was committed, it was how long it went unnoticed. Billions vanished from a company in plain sight, a company praised, funded, and publicly engaged with regulators. Yet no one intervened until collapse was unavoidable. In November of 2023, a jury convicted Bankman-Fried on 7 counts of fraud and conspiracy. The trial revealed the scale of the deception: systematic lies, misappropriated funds, and deliberate concealment. In March of 2024, he was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The sentence acknowledged wrongdoing, but accountability stopped there. The institutions that enabled the fraud remained untouched. Venture capital firms faced no consequence. Regulators were not reformed. Auditors, lawyers, consultants, all continued as before. The system absorbed the scandal and moved on. For customers, there was no such closure. They entered bankruptcy proceedings. Years of waiting, uncertain recovery. Some lost savings meant for homes, for education, for retirement. The losses cut deeper because many had chosen FTX precisely because it appeared safe. Prestige had been mistaken for protection. Beyond money, trust collapsed. Cynicism hardened. Another lesson learned by ordinary people at an extraordinary cost. The cryptocurrency industry moved quickly to distance itself. FTX was described as an anomaly, an individual failure, but it was neither the first nor the last. The industry's structure remains unchanged: minimal oversight, irreversible transactions, opaque complexity, an environment where fraud does not struggle to survive. FTX showed that even mainstream legitimacy cannot compensate for absent safeguards. The collapse also ended a fantasy: that markets regulate themselves, that reputation is enough, that technology can replace trust. None of it held. The fraud did not exploit blockchains, it ignored them. It exploited institutions that no longer functioned. For those willing to see, FTX delivered a final message. Modern finance still performs oversight, but rarely enforces it. And if failure occurred here, in full view, in a high-risk sector, then confidence elsewhere is misplaced. The house Sam Bankman-Fried built collapsed in 72 hours. $32 billion reduced to narrative dust. Its ruins remain scattered, not as a mystery, but as a warning. Whether that warning is heeded or ignored, history suggests the answer. In the end, the $30 billion didn't vanish into the code. It vanished into human greed. The glass offices in the Bahamas are empty now. The screens are dark. The king of crypto is just a man in a silent cell. Modern finance is a house of mirrors. It relies on the belief that the person on the other side is telling the truth. But tonight, the markets are closed. The tickers have stopped scrolling. There are no more trades to make.
Let the sound of the ocean wash away the numbers. Let the weight of the day dissolve. Sleep now in the safety of the real world, beyond the mirrors, beyond the glass. Good night.